Welcome one and all to the Mudai Manga Book Club podcast. Today is January 29th, 2025. This is episode 3, Gals Are Better Than Ramen. I will be your host. My name is Louie, and I'm joined by my co-host.
I need to save money, so now I have to read through my giant backlog, but I keep seeing new things that I want to own, but now I read for 6 months that I'd rather be buying instead of reading, and I don't know what I'm going to do.
Tom.
Oh, hi everybody. How are you doing this week? Welcome back to another episode of the show.
So we have 3 topics this week. First, we're going to talk about what we've been reading, what we've been listening to, what we've been watching, and then we have 2 other topics where Tom is going to do
a very stupid game with a very stupid prize. Try to figure out why I don't like Naruto.
And then after that, we're going to review The Coppersmith's Bride, Volume 1. So I will start for what we've been up to.
Yeah, so what have you been up to this week? What have you been reading?
So what I've been doing, I finished reading Neo Genesis Evangelion, the Shinji Ikari Raising Project Volume 2. So Volume 2 is a collection of 3 volumes, because it's now an omnibus. So if you look it up, I'm reading the omnibus, which is, I think, volume 456. Mm-hmm. So what this is the tagline is, think of the original Evangelion story. Now, if you took that, instead of making it all about the angels destroying Earth and huge robot battles and things like that, if you took that and said, well, what if they just got rid of all the angels and robots and made it more about, okay, we have to make this about the relationship between the characters and there's nothing crazy happening. Mm-hmm. So, there's still the research and all that stuff, and they're still doing all the synchro testing and things like that, but it's okay, this is more about how the characters interact with each other than the giant fights. So It's more of a slice of life with all the same characters, but they also changed it where, because there's no angels and huge giant mechs, at least as far as I know so far, some minor spoilers, all of the characters who were dead in the original story are alive. So Shinji's mom is alive. Asuka's mom is alive because, now major spoilers, if you don't know, they are the reason that the giant robots work. Mm-hmm. So because they're alive, it's okay, well, all the characters, like Shinji's dad, is now not a grumpy person who just sits and menaces evilly, not really evilly, but menaces over everyone with his hands folded.
I would say it's kind of evilly.
He's not supposed to be evil, though. He's just very standoffish because Shinji's mom is gone. And so it's funny. So, Shinji is kind of the same person, but not as sour or, not as depressed. But he's still kind of very shy. Asuka is still her I'm going to tell you what to do kind of personality, and Rei is there, kind of quiet and reserved. And then Shinji's mom is kind of her own little character. But Gendo, who is Shinji's dad, takes a complete 180 in his personality. He is the most, I'm going to do everything for my son as I can, and I'm going to insert myself in his life whenever possible. So there's all these situations where Gendo just shows up and is here, let me help you. It's okay. He just does all these crazy things. It's There's one time where they're doing I believe it's a sports festival, and he shows up. So he always wears the same suit everywhere, so he looks ridiculous most of the time. And then he's trying to take pictures of everything, and everyone thinks he's just some random pervert. Because he's at a high school taking pictures of everybody. And then he shows up. There's this really funny scene where they can't get the computer to work. Mm-hmm. And Gendo's I can fix it. And Shinji's mom's you can't even program a toaster. How can you fix it? It's I do it by how I fix everything else. And he just karate chops it. It's there's no way that's going to work. And then, boom, all the power turns back on.
Oh, God.
Yeah, it's really funny. But it's very much about the characters and how Shinji and Asuka and Rei, how they interact. Most of the characters from the original are in it. There's some side characters who haven't been in it, who they then show up in the in-between pages. It's why aren't they inviting us to the show? So yeah.
If I recall correctly, this is not a new manga, correct?
No. It's
okay. I believe it was also based off. There's an episode in the anime where, for some reason, it warps to this alt world where this is actually what's happening. Yes. And they decided to make it into a manga, and I have not personally read it, but I can vouch for everyone has told me that it's one of the funniest things.
Yes, I believe that's one of the last episodes of the original show. It's we're going to just take that and go. I think it's 2016 is the book I have. But that's the omnibus, so it might have been older than that.
I mean, besides it being a Neon Genesis Evangelion thing, I have heard of this. It's a thing. If you've seen the original anime, there is an episode where that sort of thing happens for a little while in it. They go to this alternate world. Yeah. And they just made that into an entire series. And
there's 6 omnibuses. So there's at least 18 books.
Oh, wow. Oh, yeah, okay.
It's done. So this is quite a bit.
I thought there was 6 volumes in 2 omnibuses, not no. 6 omnibuses.
It's 6 omnibuses. Volumes. And then the other thing I read was Don't Toy With Me, Miss Nagatoro, Volume 1. It's fun. I read it after you talked about it. It's good. I really want to kind of see how it's going to go, because it's very much this... If they didn't have the in-between pages where it shows her like, maybe I didn't do this correctly, or maybe I took this too far, this would have a very different kind of connotation to it.
Yeah.
It's like, this is super bully person, unless you understand what's going on in her head.
There's a lot of that. There is a little bit of the romance and things in the first volume, but a lot of it is in the extra stories and the side story things. If you just read the regular chapters, it does take a little bit of time. I don't remember when it sort of becomes clear of, oh yeah, it's not just that. It's still going to be very much mostly that for quite a long time. Mm-hmm. But eventually in the main story itself too, it's also like, oh, okay, it's not just that, but it definitely has that in the beginning.
Yeah, I could see it getting there eventually, but definitely in the first one, it's not, there's no romance really going on. It's very much, I'm just going to mess with you every chapter. And then the last thing I read was Mission Yozakura Family, chapter 258. It is now over, done. This is good. It was really good. It ended, I think, in the best way possible. It's probably going to end up being like 30 volumes by the end. Yeah, it ends on everything is good now. And goodbye. I don't know if you could have ended it any other way, unless you changed how the story was going.
Fair enough.
It's a nice, happy ending.
I don't want spoilers, so I'm not going to ask about it. But
yep.
Good. Nice.
Yeah, it's good. Yep. So that's what I've been reading.
As for me, I ended up, for no particular reason, going through all these books that I've bought and not yet read. So first of all, I went back and finished a series called How to Treat a Lady Knight Right, a very gag romance manga of like weakling kind of awkward mage who loves abdominal muscles, who falls in love with the most powerful knight in the land, this woman who is a knight but also like works as an adventurer, very muscular, scarred, like battle hardened sword and shield, just sword wielding knight. And it's just their stupid adventures. It is only 7 books, so it gets to an end. There is eventually, and I mean eventually, a plot. It's more of just, first it's just the 2 of them. And then, his sister shows up. And then this other character shows up. And this other character shows up. And there's a bunch of weird side characters. Very funny, very silly. He goes Super Saiyan whenever he touches a girl's abs.
Yeah, so I've only read volume 1, and it was seems like a big goof, but at least...
It's never stopped being a goof.
Okay.
There is some actual drama in the last book, and it comes to an end. It is a very good end.
Okay,
that good. Sort of brings everything to a close, brings all the characters together, has an actual dramatic ending, while still being incredibly silly.
Gotcha.
But also like, you actually found a way to be serious and meaningful too. Damn it. Now I actually care. So just all around really good. Another one I was finishing up was Kubo Won't Let Me Be Invisible, Volume 2. Similar, like, funny, goofy romance. Cute girl who sit next to very, very dense boy in Japanese high school classroom. Except this time... the boy is so lacking in presence that even while sitting in class and his teacher staring at him, they don't tend to notice him. But she can always notice him. And slowly a couple other people also can always notice him. he'll walk into a store and stand at the counter for 5 minutes, and then the shopkeeper will come up because there's someone standing behind him, and they both can't see him.
Okay.
It's just volume 2. It's still pretty early. It's fine.
Yeah, I read this when it was coming out weekly a while ago, but I never read the beginning. So I'm like, okay, this looks funny. I'll just pick it up from here. But it's good. Yeah, it's nice. It's a very happy slice of life kind of story.
There's some neat little jokes, and it sort of like builds on things as it goes, but it definitely feels like a story you could just open book 5, start reading, and understand everything just fine.
Yeah.
Then we come to, I don't know if you heard last week, where I said I was going to read Frieren Volume 2 and Yorokozu Volume 1, and then I binged 12 volumes of Don't Toy With Me, Miss Nagatoro. So this week, instead, since I still had 5 more volumes of Nagatoro to read, which did I end up doing? Well, the truth is, I did both. So I ended up binging the rest of Nagatoro up to volume 18. Yeah, I had to buy another book for that. I don't regret any of it. It just keeps getting funnier and more enjoyable.
So is that the end, or is there more?
There are about 2. I think there's going to be 2 more books.
Okay.
I think we know where it's going to end. I think it's ended in Japan.
Okay.
And we're just waiting for the last couple of books to come out in English. Although you might be able to get simulpubs. I don't know. It's clearly building towards something, and it's just gotten so absolutely hilarious. There's been multiple times where I've been reading it, and I literally put it down and just rolled around on the sofa or the bed laughing at something that just happened, and it's just like, okay. And then I also went and I read Frieren 2. It was good. I didn't like it as much as the first one.
I forget what happens in the second one.
The second one, they get the warrior.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
A great character. I love that part. And then they go through the checkpoint, and then they get to a town that's having a dialogue with demons. And second volume ends like halfway through the action part of that. And it's like, oh, okay, yeah. We're not going to find out what happens. Unlike Frieren 1 was a lot of that, oh, this is the next year. This is the year after that. This is 20 years after that. Frieren 2 like takes place over the course of like 3 weeks. And half of the book takes place over the course of like a day and a half.
Yeah, that's
true.
So
it's back to a more normal seeming manga. It still has that Frieren-ness, but it feels like a build-up book. Something cool is going to happen soon, but we got to do all the other pieces to get there.
Okay. Yes.
That's what I would say book 2 was.
Yeah, the demon stuff gets more interesting in book 3.
It started to get interesting, and it cuts off kind of in the middle of people fighting. So it's like, oh, okay.
That's going to happen.
Yorokozu 1, that's bonkers good. That's fantastic. Like, I'm sold after that first book. So
wait, which one?
Mission Yorokozu Family. Volume 1.
Yozakura. Yeah.
I can't spell. Yozakura. Yes.
Yeah, Yozakura.
Yozakura Family, Volume 1.
Yeah.
It's bonkers good. It's really great. I'm sold. I'm going to get the rest of it once I have money again, which will be soon, probably.
Yeah.
And lastly, definitely not me just finishing off the giant pile of books that I should have already read by now. I read Bakemonogatari Part 1 again, because I'm going to try and read the rest of the series. I have thoughts. I have things that I need to explain. It's still one of my favorite books. I still really like Nishio Ishin. I can explain why I think other people might not like it, but I think it's great. I've gotten started on the next one, and it's really great. So I don't care. Cool. I'm going to read them all.
I have not read that one.
There's like 20 novels worth of stuff out.
Okay.
And it has a couple animes, and the animes are quite popular. It didn't start coming out into the US until several years ago, but I think there's like 25 novels.
Nice.
They tend to be long chapters of weird apparitions and ghost stories, but like not spooky stories, but a person has a problem that's now become something supernatural, and the main character is trying to help them with that. But it's Nishio Ishin, so half of the book is just the main character talking to the character the story is about, and just random goofy things they talk about.
Okay.
And lots of word puns, lots of name puns, lots of the main character getting insulted to his face. and trying to keep up with what's going on. And like being a classic harem anime where he's clearly not going to get together with any of these other people, but he's constantly surrounded by girls. But at the same time, book 1, which is the first 2 stories, is really good.
Okay.
I think it's really good. But it alternates back and forth between this kind of almost literary dialogue of like people just talking, like a Waiting for Godot, but like that type of they're just talking and this basically doesn't matter, but I think it's entertaining, so I don't care.
Okay. Yep.
In another light novel in another author's hands, you'd probably cut 2/3 of the book because it's just rambling. But the writing is good, the characters are funny, and the conversations are entertaining. That if you like them, you're like, I don't care, I'll read 500 pages of this. Sure, let's do another 700. Why not? Yeah, so I really like it. I think it's really good. We'll talk about it again at some point, but that is what I have been up to as well.
Cool. Sounds good.
Well, with that, we're going to get on to our small topic for today, which is going to be something unusual and new we're going to try out. We're going to have a game where Louie here will have to try and guess the extremely specific reason why I don't like Naruto.
The extremely specific part has me worried.
The extremely specific part. So, like, what you will need to guess is... You don't have to get it down to like the chapter or the episode number. You don't have to be that specific. You do need to say what event happens that it is that bothers me, or the thing that's supposedly explaining why that's okay that happens.
Okay.
So there's like 2 sort of sections that come together on this thing. We're going to try this out, do a little game show thing, see how it goes. And I'm thinking, if you get it and you figure it out, then we'll probably start doing more. And if you don't get it and I win, we'll probably just stop there.
Okay.
So that no matter what, I'll have a winning record.
Yeah. Funny how that works.
But to make sure that this doesn't make us have like a 5-hour podcast episode.
So what are the rules?
I'm going to set a timer for 10 minutes.
Okay.
You can talk it out. I also have 10 hints. I'm going to start with the first one. They do get more specific as they go, because the first one I think will help you.
Okay.
But not as much as it would have helped you 15 years ago, because you'll see.
Have you read all of Naruto?
No.
Okay.
I have not.
I have, but it's been a while. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So I have not read it
completely.
I have not read it completely. I have not read a lot of it.
Okay.
I guess we'll make this. We'll make that hint 0 of I have not read or watched. Like, if you get the answer from the anime too, that's fine. Because I know I've also watched up to the same point that I've read, specifically beginning to where it is. Although for me, it's from the manga, not from the anime.
Okay.
Back then, I was a huge manga snob, unlike now, where I'm a super huge manga snob, unless there's a light novel version. Back then, though, if there was a light novel version, I wouldn't have read it. I would have read the manga. But now it's like, no, that's not good enough. It just needs to be words on paper. So hint 0 is...
You haven't read book 72.
I haven't read the whole series. So I'll give you 10 hints.
Okay.
Talk it out. You can sort of say what you think. If you want more hints, I'll give them. We'll slowly work our way down. Okay. And I'll give you 10 minutes, and if you don't get it, then I'll explain it to you, and we'll go from there.
Sounds good.
So, we will start the timer now. And your first hint is I have read past the point that I hated. I've purchased, read, and seen past this point. Okay, and to go back with the clue 0, I have not purchased through the Chunin exam. I don't know how far into it, but definitely before the major tournament.
So that's
part of it.
So that means you haven't read past the time skip.
Nope.
Okay. So let's see. If you haven't read past the Chunin exam, but the Chunin exam is farther than the part you didn't like. Okay. Let's see. So there's... Oh, okay. So for anyone who doesn't know, Naruto is about a ninja school or a ninja world. It's not a recent story. But it's very popular. And
I'm pretty sure you know about Naruto, but yes, it's about it's about ninjas in a fake world who... It's a very, very, very famous manga. People probably do already know about it. That's why I figured this would be okay. Yeah.
There is a sequel.
I will give you your next hint already, which is the event is pretty famous. It's when I tell you, oh, it's this scene, you'll be like, oh yeah, I remember that. Okay.
So let's see. So there's a bunch of scenes, and before that, there's the scene, the very beginning where he gets the ultimate ninja scroll for the shadow clones. It's not that. There's the part where the team of Naruto, Sasuke, and Sakura do their little training, fight Kakashi, learn to be a team. It's not that, probably. That's really early.
The next thing that happens is they go to the Hidden Mist Village.
Yep, where they
fight the
ninjas. Yes, and then they fight the swordsman on the bridge.
Yep.
And then I think it's the Chunin exam.
Then starts the Chunin exam.
And then there
might be like a single chapter in between it where something else happens. It's not.
And then
it's not that. And then it's the Chunin exam.
Then the Chunin exam there's the written test.
Yep.
There's the survival training. There's the elimination tournament. Yes. And then there's a final tournament.
The elimination tournament, I know I do not own all of that. So it is before the elimination tournament.
Before the elimination tournament.
Because I own part of that, it must be before that. Your next hint is, this one will sound weird, but I did have to sit and read through a lot when I first discovered this thing I hated about it to make sure this thing I hated about it was a thing.
Okay.
It took work.
So is the thing you like related to a specific character, or is it just a thing?
The next hint is it involves the starting 4 main characters of Naruto, Sasuke, Sakura, and Kakashi.
It involves
them. It involves them, but the thing that makes me so angry doesn't only relate to them.
Okay.
And or isn't about all of them.
Okay. Let's see. So the one thing I can think of is that... So there's the Kakashi. I think it's Team 7.
I believe that could be. Yeah, I didn't.
So it's the 3 of them, and Kakashi is their mentor. Mm-hmm. Then there's 2 other teams of Hinata. I forget, I always get the other 2.
Okay, I'm going to give you this next hint.
Okay.
So you don't have to try and remember. It's before the Chunin exam.
Okay.
It's specifically before that.
Okay. So I'm trying to remember. The only major thing that happens before the Chunin exam is the battle with the bridge that I can remember. And that's... So there they do some... They're there to guard... Because the Mafia is trying to stop the construction of the bridge. So they hire 2 other rival ninjas to kind of stop them. There's a big fight on the bridge with Kakashi. I gotta look up his name.
I can grab it. I have the book right here. I believe it's Zabuton.
Yes. Yep. Zabuza and Haku.
Yes.
Yeah.
Zabuza and Haku.
So there's the big fight between Kakashi and Zabuza, where he reveals his copy ninja training, and then there's Haku who fights with Sasuke and Naruto, which is where Naruto unleashes his inner demon powers and wins the fight that way. And then Kakashi uses his copy powers to overpower Zabuza. And then there's... Once they win, the mob or mafia, whoever hired Zabuza, betrays them and Zabuza goes on a rampage and kills all of them. Haku is... trying to think what you could dislike about it.
Okay, so I will... The next couple of clues were going to basically lead you to this, so I will say the next clue was it's over several books, but it's not the first book.
Yeah.
And that's because it is about that section.
Okay.
But you're in the right ballpark of time.
Okay.
But it's a specific thing that happens in that. And I'm going to alter this one slightly because I think it gives away too much. But the next two.
Okay.
The thing that I don't like.
Yep.
One part of it is because of what someone says.
Oh.
And the second part of it involves Sasuke. So to get to the specific event.
Well, there's the... trying to remember. So if it involves Sasuke, it's either him... If it's around that time, there's the time when he's training on the tree.
Yep.
Where he's learning, and it turns out that...
Chakra control.
Yeah, chakra control to learn how to climb a tree without actually climbing it, just running up it. Yep. Sakura's really good at it. Naruto's awful.
Yep.
Sasuke is decent, but
middling.
Needs to get better. So they do a big training thing to get better at that. Trying to remember. I think the Sharingan shows up in the fight with Haku.
Yeah, I will tell you that yes, Sasuke gains the Sharingan during the fight with Haku. And you learn about the Sharingan the first time with Kakashi in the fight with Zabuza.
Okay. Is the thing you don't like related to the Sharingan?
No.
Okay.
It is not related to the Sharingan. I'm going to give you the next hint.
Okay.
Because we're at 10 minutes now, but I want to give you a send.
Okay.
I want to give you... Because you are very close, and this might push you over.
Okay.
I do hope it doesn't, because my 10th hint is my favorite, and you'll hate it.
Okay.
But the 9th one is, I doubt that this is true.
Okay.
But it feels like it could have been a retcon from people being upset. The specific incident that drives me crazy is probably not a retcon, but at least me, when I first sat down and really thought about this, I felt like I could make a case that maybe this was changed. And it's a very specific thing that happens.
The only thing I could think of is that Sasuke gets killed, or looks like he gets killed, because he gets stabbed repeatedly by the ice spikes to protect Naruto, and that's what drives him to go crazy. Because Naruto has, at this point of the story, is not very kind of, I'm going to protect everybody. He's still kind of feeling I'm going to learn how to do this. And Sasuke is much more advanced, so
I'm going to call that your final guess.
Okay.
Because we have been on over 10 minutes.
All right, fine.
But I am going to tell you the 10th hint, because I do want to say it. The 10th hint is, I literally have no other hints, so I'm just going to spend the rest of this time razzing you.
Hey, that's not a hint.
Which is okay, because I did say it was either something that was said or something that happened, and the thing that happened was Sasuke getting killed but not dying.
Oh, well,
yes.
Yeah, okay.
It's not that, although that is a major part of it.
Okay.
It is what Zabuza says about how Haku would not kill people. And then Sasuke, who had just been killed, comes back to life.
Oh, okay.
That has driven me fucking crazy.
Okay.
For 20 goddamn years. And I know this because I was buying Naruto manga books when they were coming out in English. And I have the first printings of them. And I can check the date. And they say they came out in 2004.
Mm-hmm.
So I have been pissed off about this for at least 18 years. So I'm going to be completely honest. I did actually sit at one point in my life when I realized how much this bothered me and go through books pretty much 1 to 6, although it's really only 2, 3, and 4 that this whole arc takes place in.
Yeah. Yep.
And track everything, because what bothered me was all this stuff happens, like you had mentioned. They have a bunch of scenes, they show up, they fight Zabuza, Haku shows up, they do training, these other things. There's a bunch of scenes in between that we haven't talked about specifically. Sasuke gets killed protecting Naruto and dies. And 7 chapters later, Sasuke wakes up alive.
Yeah.
And
okay,
Haku is called a cold-blooded killer multiple times until after killing Sasuke. And then suddenly Zabuza mentions that, hey, they're not really a killer. And then Sasuke wakes up. To me, it was one of the biggest instances of Deus Ex Machina, which, to be specific, is a literary device where something solves a problem that was never brought up in the story. And going through it, there is not a single mention of Haku being shown as someone who wouldn't murder you until after Sasuke is killed. And there's no hint that Sasuke should have survived. Sasuke was killed, and then for no discernible reason, it turns out the person who killed them isn't a killer, and then for no discernible reason, Sasuke gets up alive.
Yeah. I'm looking at the page where he dies. It's like, yeah, it looks like he's dead.
Yeah. Now, and reviewing this, I came across another couple of very specific things. So if you have book 2 available to you, if you were to go to chapter...
So I know there's the one where it looks like he's dead.
Chapter 9.
Chapter 9.
This is much earlier, where chapter 9, they start off on this adventure, and 2 ninjas come out of a puddle,
wrap
Kakashi up in chains, and slice him into pieces. And so he dies in that chapter. And in the next chapter, no, surprise, he's still alive. And he kicks the crap out of that.
I think it's the same chapter.
No, it's 2 chapters. He dies, and then the next chapter he comes back. In the next chapter, Sasuke stops them for a little bit, and then Kakashi shows up and finishes them off.
Okay, yep.
But no, he dies at the end of it. However, 5 pages before the end, there's a distinct picture of a puddle. And then the next panel is literally Kakashi looking at that puddle.
Yes.
And then 2 panels later is the ninjas coming out of that puddle. And it's the only puddle. It's shown there. It's very specific. That is the kind of thing that you want. There is a clue there that the author can grab later and turn back to and say, hey, here's why.
Yeah, he knew it was coming.
He knew it was coming. Okay, the next chapter... Yeah, Kakashi's not actually dead.
Yeah.
Sure. Great. Perfect. In the entire thing with Haku, and I'm not going to let you talk because I know you were probably going to say all these other things that are going to come up, but the only times that you see Haku until that fight is when he's taking Zabuza away, where he's just almost killed Zabuza to, knock him out. And he specifically says, hey, be careful. If you take those out even a millimeter wrong, you'll actually die. Defending Zabuza while he's recovering, in which Haku breaks a man's arm and threatens to murder 2 other people.
Mm-hmm.
There's a scene where Haku is wandering around where Naruto and Sasuke are training. We're going to get back to that one. And then there's the scenes leading up to the battle, and Haku is literally telling them, I don't necessarily want to kill you, but I will kill you. And then he proceeds to kill Sasuke.
But not quite. Yes.
And then Sasuke wakes up later.
Yeah. Okay. I could see that being an issue. And it kind of is, because, okay, you got all this build up. It's like, okay, character dies. No. Big emotional scene. That's what drives Naruto crazy. That's what brings out the fox. But then it's not. It's like, okay, so it was a lot of build up for nothing.
So the three things that I've seen that like I look at and go, someone could say, oh, but like you wanted something that would hint at it. Well, here's a hint of like, hey, he didn't kill those people when they were threatening Zabuza. And Haku in that scene literally says, we shouldn't kill them yet because the people who are chasing us will find us if we do. So we're not gonna. So that's why I specifically didn't kill them. Mm-hmm. He didn't say he wouldn't kill them, that he didn't want to kill them, just that killing them would be bad. The scene with Sasuke and Naruto with Haku. Oh, clearly he's not trying to murder them. Again, we've shown Haku has self-control.
Yeah.
It could be a scouting mission rather than them not willing to kill them. And literally the first time someone says Haku wasn't necessarily willing to kill was not until Zabuza was talking about it after Sasuke had died, after all this had happened. Mm-hmm. The only thing that I could say is close to a like real true hint was Zabuza gets stabbed by the needles and goes into a death-like state that even Kakashi can't tell.
Yep.
That's how Sasuke's taken out. However, logically, that doesn't make any sense because Haku was attacking Naruto and Sasuke jumped in front.
Right.
And we talked about it being a precision attack. A precision attack at someone else that you stepped in front of.
It's not going to be the same.
It shouldn't have worked to that. It should have killed him. And until Sasuke wakes up, nothing is shown until at the start of a chapter, he wakes up. I think the only thing that disproves my retcon theory is Sasuke getting the Sharingan during that fight. Like, you wouldn't have your character power up and then immediately die. You'd want to give them a chance to use it and be cool.
Yeah.
He does kind of, but then Naruto does that 3 times over when his Kitsune seal starts to crack.
Right.
And we already knew about the Sharingan because Kakashi had used it previously and was using it again during that fight already.
That is true. Yeah, okay. I could see why you're not a huge fan of it. Because there's other things as the story goes on that I'm not a huge fan of. There's characters that are introduced that are interesting, but they get pushed to the sidelines. Some of the stories near the end get kind of like, wait, this is the bad guy?
Okay.
But yeah. No, there's a lot of things like, this could have been handled differently.
Mm-hmm.
But I could see this being like, okay, I thought he was dead. That's the whole point of the emotional scene of him holding Sasuke. It's like, oh, yeah, he's dead. Mm-hmm. That just goes out the window if he just wakes up again.
Yeah, and I think if there had been more shown, like, where it's Naruto thinks Sasuke is dead, but there's a good reason to think that maybe he's not. If that was more... If there was something that you could point to in the book and be like, wait, like, there's these 2 little side panels. You can see Sasuke's chest is moving. Like, he's still breathing. But Naruto doesn't notice it. Then it would be fine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But there's nothing you can point to until chapters later after Sasuke's been killed that Zabuza first brings up that Haku maybe doesn't want to kill.
Right.
And yes, Haku also says, I don't want to have to kill you, but then also immediately says, but I will if I have to. And right now I think I have to. And that Deus Ex Machina type story beat, me personally, that is one of the most unforgivable sins in a story. I would rather, especially in one where it's shown already that they're going to set things up and twist them. Mm-hmm. Like with the Kakashi part, where they clearly know how to set it up, and then they didn't. And that's what really bothers me.
Yeah, it's one of those, you see this in movies all the time. Everyone has this plot armor where, oh, you could shoot at me or do things to me. It's that I'm the main character. I'm not dying.
And this was like I said, like for like 18, 20 years, like this drove me crazy. But then I've read it all again for this because I wanted to talk about it. And I don't mind it as much as I used to.
Okay.
I think I've sort of gotten a better sense of, I still don't think there's that puddle evidence like there was for Kakashi, where it's, here's a specific 100% crystal clear point where you could say, yes, this was planned in advance.
Mm-hmm.
There's evidence, Zabuza getting paralyzed rather than killed.
Yep.
And him saying that he doesn't want to have to kill them, even though he immediately says, like, moments where it's like, okay, maybe this is really what they meant. But I still don't really like it. But I'm more okay with it. And I've seen other things in Naruto again when I've been looking through it again. And it's like, wow, the backgrounds in this are fucking amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The art's really good.
All the trees in the background all looking really nice.
Mm-hmm.
For some throwaway panel of them running up the side of a specific tree for the 15th time. It's like, yeah, it looks really good. And the other reason I wanted to bring this up, well, I guess there's two parts of this. First, when we talked about making the show, we talked about how we don't want to spend time talking about things we don't like.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And this, I feel like, is the farthest that and I'm assuming you kind of want to go with we don't like, of, hey, here's the problem I have with this series. I get why it's good.
Yeah.
Other than that, I still kind of enjoy it. I like watching the fights in Naruto is a ton of fun, but
yes.
I don't really like it. So that's one reason why I wanted to bring this up and be like, hey, here's as far as we're going to go in the negative direction.
Yeah.
And it's kind of funny.
Yeah, that is true. It is funny that that's what really drove you to like, yeah, I don't like this. But it makes sense, yeah, because the goal is not to be negative, but just like in every story, there's parts you like, parts you don't like. Mm-hmm. So it's like, it's good to discuss the specific things you don't like, so then you can see, okay, is this a one-off, or does this story keep doing it over and over and over again? And there are times when a lot of stories keep doing it over and over again because this character is the main character. He's thrown into these situations, but he always survives somehow, and it gets boring after a while.
Or this character does something that they weren't really originally supposed to do, or like, oh, they weren't strong enough to do that. But then they are strong enough. And then the next chapter, oh, they haven't had a reason to get stronger, but now they're stronger. And they're stronger again. Like, why? Or they're super strong, and then all of a sudden in the next chapter, like, oh, no, they can't do it.
Yes. The dreaded power creep.
Yeah. Or, like, mismanaged, oh, he can punch a tank, but he can't open a locked door.
Yeah.
Like, just these weird logical inconsistencies and things like that. And that's kind of also the other reason I wanted to bring this up, because a couple weeks ago when I was hanging out with some friends, we ended up talking about manga and anime, and we were talking about different books that we liked, and I mentioned Archdemon's Dilemma, and he's like, yeah, I got halfway through it. I didn't really like it. It had a lot of grooming in it.
Okay.
And I'm sitting there thinking, like, yeah, but not really. I see where you see that, but that's not really what's there. But okay, I can see where you're coming from, and I can see if you really don't like that. Yeah, it has a little bit of that vibe, but it's not really like that. And as you mentioned with Nagatoro, and I've mentioned with Nagatoro, and everyone else has also mentioned with Nagatoro, it's kind of bullying for a pretty good amount of time. Eventually it's not. Eventually it's clearly not. Eventually it's clearly like, she really likes him, and she's really shy, and she has the emotional maturity of a 5-year-old. So she's going to keep punching him in the back of the head to show that she likes him.
Yeah.
And it gets there, but you have to get to that point, and a lot of people can get turned off by that. This thing with Naruto, for me, it's like this really weirdly specific thing. But for me personally, it's like, because I've seen it in other stories too, and whenever I see it, it's just like, I'm done. I'm out. And I wanted to bring this up and also like to talk about and remind people of just like, we're recommending these things. We're talking about things that we like, but a really small thing can make somebody hate something that you really enjoy. And that's okay. Not everyone's going to like everything that you like. Not everything is going to hit in the same way for everybody. And sometimes something that feels inconsequential or unimportant can ruin a story for somebody else. And you and I and people listening and everybody in the world just accept it and be okay with it. It's all right. Like, that story didn't hit. for you. I'm sorry. We still think it's great. I still think it's great. Unless it's Naruto, in which case I think it's complete trash and I think it should be burned in a fire.
No.
Other than the really cool battle scenes, because those are still great. And it's annoying because the first part of this has one of my favorite battles that I forgot about how good of a turnaround it was. Where, we're going to talk about it at some point. I know, because we've talked about doing, like, what's your favorite battle, and it's the windmill shuriken.
Oh, okay. Yep.
That is such a good scene.
Mm-hmm.
It's so good. But we have to just accept that. And this is another good, easy one that you and I can bring up because I can just complain about Naruto for a while. These can get really personal, even though it's not really about us. It's just things in the story that we don't like or we don't want to see. And so, because of that, if you don't like some things that we don't like, that we like, sorry. Hopefully we'll come up with something that you do like next time.
Yep.
But it's all going to be opinion in the end.
Nah, no story is perfect. There's flaws in all of them. But that doesn't mean you don't like it. Alia. Except for what? Which one?
No, I said, except for Alia hides her feelings in Russian.
I haven't read that
That's
yet.
Not true. That story has flaws. No, there's only one story I know that doesn't have flaws. And you also haven't read it. And I haven't talked about it on the show.
Okay.
And I know it has flaws. But I refuse. I refuse to see them.
Okay. That's probably as negative as we're ever going to get.
Yeah. Like, we'll point out things that we don't like in something. If there's a series that we do really like and then it takes a really hard turn that we don't like, maybe we'll talk about that. But we don't want to be here being like, oh, this series is terrible. Let's talk about why it's so bad. It's such a junky McJunkerson.
I'd rather talk about something I like.
Yeah, exactly the same. And also, there'll probably be things where you're like, oh, this is so awesome. Why don't you guys talk about it? It's like, no, I don't like it.
Or we haven't read it.
Oh, why don't you guys talk about Naruto? I mean, that's going to be the vast majority of things. But it's like, oh, why don't you talk about Naruto? And I'm like, no, I don't like it. It's not that good. Like, it has its moments. There's things about it that are incredible. But this just, for me, breaks the entire series. It's just, I don't care anymore. And again... Like, this is me calmed down. This is me 20 years on from this hate rage reading where I literally went through page by page reading every line and, like, thinking in my head, okay, does this show anything? No, it doesn't. This doesn't do it. And the only thing I can say to that is I have one or two other series I've done this for, and this is the only one that's negative. But it's stuck with me this whole time of just, like, no, you just fucked it up. But I think the most important thing that we can finish up on.
You won.
No, you won, technically. You did get it correct at the end.
I guess so.
On your final guess, you mentioned it was Sasuke's death, which means we have to do more of these.
I win.
So that I can win.
Nothing.
Yes, we are unfortunately going to be forced to continue doing this.
I'll add it to the notes.
I literally have no other ideas. I'm so mad.
Okay, so next time I'll come up with one and see if you can guess it.
Yes. It doesn't have to be why you hate something.
No, but I'll come up with something. Okay.
Some sort of quiz, some sort of guess, some sort of weird conversation starter thing. But yes, congratulations, you did it. You bastard.
I mean... So our review today is for Coppersmith's Bride, Volume 1. There are 4 volumes out in English so far, but there are 6 in Japanese. So anyone who doesn't know, this is a modern era Japanese story about Coppersmith who lives in, I think, Niigata. Niigata, right. And it's about coppersmithing, specifically a specific coppersmith family. And for anyone who doesn't know what coppersmithing is, the book actually does a really good job explaining it. But what it is, you take a sheet of copper and you hammer it to get to the desired shape you want. So, for example, you hammer it into a tea kettle. And it's the whole art about how they do that and the time it takes and all the preparation, the ways you can dress it up and things like that. And specifically, this is about the bride of a coppersmith. And it's about two main characters. So there's Shuu, who is the main coppersmith. I think he's out of high school.
Yes, he drinks, so he's at least 20.
Yeah.
He might be like 21.
And then there's the main girl, who's obviously going to be the bride. She's not a bride yet. And that's Shiina. She is a freshman in college, and she can't drink. So I think she's 18. Yeah. So he's a little
freshman
older.
in college is 18 years old.
And they kind of grew up together. You learn later that she moved to that city. But she's always been around the family. She's always watched them and learned. And it's the interaction between the two of them, because before the story starts, they've been dating. And in the very first chapter is when they get engaged. And just so you know, Shuu is I am super focused on coppersmithing. Coppersmithing is my life, but he's not obsessed with it. Like, it's not like he's a super nerdy person about coppersmithing. He just gets so focused, he almost blocks everything out. So he just sits there hammering over and over all day long and just kind of zones out of everything else. And Shiina is very much, I love coppersmithing. I like watching him coppersmith. She's not interested in doing coppersmithing.
Yeah, I would say it's less that she loves coppersmithing and more of she loves watching him. She likes seeing the things that they make, and she's recognizes that it takes a lot of effort and work, but it's not that she doesn't want anything to do with it, but she's obviously not going to start smithing copper.
Nope. And then, at least in the first volume, there's two other main characters who show up. There's a number of side characters, but the two other main characters that show up is Grandpa and Grandma. Shiina calls them very different names.
Yeah.
But they are, because this is a coppersmithing group, there's Shuu is like on the newer side. There's the grandfather who is like the elder statesman. I think he runs it.
Yes, he is the main smith of their little, I don't know what you would call it, but the little crafting shop that they run.
Yeah.
He owns it. He's the main smith there. And his wife, the grandmother, is their lead clerk who takes care of the store, meets customers, takes care of other like business related things that's not smithing directly. And just to make sure that we're clear on it, these are Shuu's grandmother and grandfather.
That is true, yes. But the main point of the story is that Shuu and Shiina were dating before the story starts. And then as soon as the story starts, they're pretty involved with each other already. But then as this first chapter goes, they're like, hey. She was like, want to get engaged? And she's like, what? Or no, he says, do you want to get married? And she kind of freaks out, runs off, because she's just a freshman in college. So she's like, okay, what's going on? It's like, how am I going to do this? Would this be a good idea? And then she eventually comes around. It's like, yeah, this is a great idea. And it's the interaction of someone who's really into one thing, which is Shuu. And then Shiina is still trying to figure out what she wants to do with her life. And do they want to get together? And then Shuu is very much, while he is very focused sometimes, there are a number of scenes where he's just doing it, and then he just kind of tips over. And she's like, oh, he's just depressed. Because he's learning his moods. Because Shuu is not a very talkative person.
I think to help make it clearer, the whole him asking her to marry him is he hands her a cup that he's working on.
Oh, right.
And says, what do you think about this? I'm planning on giving it as a wedding gift. And she was like, oh, really? Who are you going to give it to? Like, who is it for? Oh, it's for us. Would you like to get married? What? You, me, married. Like, I think that's why I made this as a wedding present to you. What? And then she's like, can I think about this? Okay, bye. And then runs away.
And then you find out later he showed it to the grandfather. He's like, this thing isn't that good. Why are you giving it as a wedding gift? And then that makes him even more depressed.
Mm-hmm.
And then, but eventually Shiina comes back around and she's like, yes, we will get married and we'll get engaged because I'm still in college and things like that. So the whole story is about just how they live their lives now that they're engaged, and also learning about coppersmithing, because Shuu is good, but he's not amazing. He has a lot to learn, because what you also learn as the story goes on is that his father died in an accident a number of years ago, and he was an amazing coppersmith, and he's trying to live up to that reputation, but he's not quite there yet.
His grandfather, too, is also an amazing smith. And I think, because this is something I still can't wrap my head around, but like, this is obviously about craftsmen who are very good, but try to picture a teapot made out of a single sheet of copper where nothing is cut. Like nothing is, the spout is not attached later. It's just been folded so that it makes a teapot. Mm-hmm. And not just that, it's an incredibly finely crafted teapot with a perfect spout, hand hammered into shape.
Yep.
By someone. That costs, I think the similar, they show the prices on some of them, is like 150,000 yen.
Yep.
Which is,
I think in the story
$1,500.
Yeah.
$1,500.
Around there. Yeah.
I
think it's
thereabouts.
Yeah. And that's one of the things, like, it's a cool story about this couple and them just kind of realizing, okay, we're engaged now, what does that mean? But then you have the whole other aspect of the story of him not only learning more about coppersmithing or improving himself, but it's also kind of more of a teaching story where it's teaching the reader, how does this work? Because before I started reading this, I had no idea that this was a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I know you can coppersmith and things like that, but I never knew it was specifically you hammer a sheet of copper. Because you see all the copper sculptures where they're using wires and punches and things like that, but this is just sitting there hammering it over and over again to get the shape of a cup, vases, tea kettles, all kinds of things you can think of. And this story does a really good job of explaining the process, what it takes to do it, how much time they spend doing it, because I think they said to do that kettle took someone about a week to hammer it to be like that. And they go into, okay, the people who are really into this are fine crafts they use to celebrate weddings and things like that. But then you have the person who comes in off the street. It's like, well, I could get a tea kettle for $10. Why would I spend $1,500 on this kettle? And it's in the story, Shiina explains why she likes coppersmithing to people who have no idea what coppersmithing is. And it's that dynamic of how someone who's in coppersmithing but not, and why she likes it, versus someone who's super into coppersmithing and why they like it. And then you got the people on the outside like, I have no idea what this is. And that explanation of this is why it's really cool really comes through.
Mm-hmm. Very much so. That's a big part of it. And like we said, the smithing part of it, there's constantly little things that sort of show up of, like they talk about, one of the things about it being copper is the patina and the aging will cause it to slowly change over time. And so that's another reason why these are these pieces, and why you don't buy one that's $10, you buy one of these, because it will last years upon years upon years, and it will slowly grow and alter itself as the patina adjusts, giving you the sort of piece that will last all this time and is something so beautifully decorated. There's a scene at one point where we meet the character who makes the hammers for Shuu and talks about, oh yeah, like coppersmiths, when they get a new hammer, they'll specifically strike it in such a way to put a mark into it, not like their seal, but just like an edge or a crack or something to give it a slightly off shape, so that they can look at the hammer marks on a piece and see their own thing. They can tell whose is whose, and they do it specifically, not just because they can. And there's a lot of scenes of Shuu working on a piece and trying to figure out something. Like the second chapter is all about squishy things. It doesn't go where it sounds like it's going to go either. But there's a great scene of them in the past where, like, a year or two ago, he was trying to do something with flowers. And so Shuu, being this incredibly focused person, buys giant piles of flower petals, dumps them in the middle of the workshop, and just flops on them. She's just laying on these flower petals. And Shiina walks in and is like, okay, flops down next to him. So, what you doing? What's going on here?
Yeah.
And he explains what's going on. And eventually, like, Shiina gets annoyed at him and just grabs his arm and just bites him just to get back at him for teasing her. And then he's like, oh, that's it. And then it shows the piece that he made, and it's got these, like, series of cherry blossom petals in the shape of the bite mark on his arm, but, like, on the piece in that specific curve of her teeth. Just instead of teeth marks, it's flower petals. And she's looking at it going like, why? Why did you do this?
Why is that a thing? Yeah. But the other thing is really funny is that Shiina, because Sheena's now engaged, the grandmother is trying to teach her how to do all this, and it's one of those, okay, how you act now reflects on the store, and it's the interactions with, like, Shiina always thought that they hated her, but they were always like, we don't hate you. You're kind of rude sometimes, just because of the way you act and talk. But if you weren't here, we would think that Shuu would never find anyone ever. And
yeah, that's a hilarious scene of, like, you know, we're kind of glad because, like, if you didn't exist, Shuu would probably never get married. And it's like, and she's just there like, really? Also, yeah, you're probably right.
Yeah. But then there's also the interactions of Shiina and Shuu, because as the story progresses, you kind of learn more about how they interact with each other, not just through the smithing part and not through, I don't want to say just the biting and things like that, but you hear about them just dating for a while, and Shiina wants him to take a more active role sometimes, because Shiina is the more outgoing, more, let's do this, let's go this way, let's go that way. And Shu's kind of like, oh, sure, let's go do that. So in one chapter, it's Shuu is supposed to plan the date, and it's the interaction of, okay, how she's like, I'm just going to follow along and test and see what happens. And then as they're doing it, it's like, oh, he's kind of steering her towards the more romantic things. As I wanted to take us here so we could find something for us that we could do together. Because that's going to be where we're going to go from now on. It's not just, I like this. It's now things of, we like this. And it's that interaction of the two of them just being regular people that also is really good at just being a very wholesome, cozy kind of story.
Yeah, and you see that relationship develop, like, specifically in that scene where they're on this date that they're going on. Shuu is like, okay, well, we're going to go here and shop for this thing, and we're going to pick something out because we should pick it together because we're going to be a family. And Shu's this very mostly serious, very quiet person, and Sheena's much more outgoing, more goofy, more fun-loving, but, like, she immediately turns and goes like, okay, this is the one I think. And I'm like, I'm sorry I picked the most expensive one. That's not what I meant, but we need to talk about this. Like, is this too much? Is this too expensive? Like, we need to start having these conversations. And it's a very realistic romance, and it's a very realistic thing of even Shiina, who's this not super serious person, understands and, like, recognizes when Shu's trying really hard and responds in kind, and it feels very natural. Contrasted with a couple of chapters before where Shiina and the girl who makes the hammers, who was her upperclassman, meet and get together and then go out for coffee, and it starts off great of like, wait, it's you? Wow, you've grown up and you look so much more mature. Let's go out for lunch. Oh, I'll have a grape float. I'll have an iced coffee. Wow, you're so mature. You're having an iced coffee. You know what? I'll have an iced coffee instead.
Yeah, and there's a funny panel of you see them 3 years ago. They're kind of similar looking. And then it jumps forward to now. She has grown a lot taller, and Shiina has barely changed at all. She's like only slightly taller, and her style hasn't changed that much. But Saku is like much more mature. It's like, okay, I'm much older now. It's just like, oh, I haven't changed at all. But then there's a nice cute scene where it's like, Shu's like, you don't have to change. I love you the way you are. And also she was very shy about showing affection outside. So it's kind of like she there's a lot of that interaction of the two different personalities while also kind of figuring out a way for them to work together.
And that leads to another great part of this whole series of scenes is that Shuu shows up and he's like there, like, just like, oh, hi, how you doing? Yeah, it's good. They have that talk about themselves of like, I don't care that, Shiina, that you're not growing up. I want to be married to you. Shiina comes back, like, they then come back to the table and Shiina's there just beat red, not looking at anyone, incredibly embarrassed about what he just said. And Saku's like, what's going on? What are you talking about? Are you two dating or something? Oh no, we're engaged. What?
What have I missed?
What? Like, wait, you didn't tell her? She never asked. He literally says, she didn't ask. So I didn't tell her that we were engaged. And then they have a party, and then they all get drunk. Except for Shiina, because she's not old enough. And then they have this long conversation after they've been drinking where Shuu and Saku keep trying to one-up like how much they know about Shiina while they're just drunk, stumbling their way back. Shuu is still like incredibly quiet. But it's like, I knew her since elementary school. It's like, well, I was in elementary school with her.
Yeah. It's a nice scene. It's like, okay. Because they're all friends. So it's just one of those. Yeah. Yeah. It's a really heartwarming story. The other funny things are there's a side story. I think it's just a single page of how Grandma and Grandpa, or I believe it's Yuki and Tomogawa.
I'm trying to find it right now so I can get those names. But yeah, I believe her name is Yuki.
Yep. And the reason it's funny is because the grandmother works at a department store and the grandfather shows up as I am here to sell my wares. I'm an artisan. And he's so nervous and just falls immediately head over heels for her. And it's like, hello. It's like, the first thing he says is her name and will you go out with me? It's like, why did I just say that? And it just shows you they are, the whole family on the guy's side is not the most communicative.
They're terrible.
People at all.
They're terrible.
Yeah. They could be better.
Very terrible.
Yeah.
They could be better is an extraordinary understatement. I am an extreme introvert, and I talk more than that with other people. She was like, oh, there's customers coming today. He like walks over to Shiina like, please, I haven't asked you for anything recently. Please go talk to them so I don't have to because I can't do it. Yeah. And his grandfather's literally in the background like, God damn it. You're so useless. Not that I'm any better, but also.
Yeah. And the other thing is that in the story, there's also scenes from the author. I forgot that we have mentioned their name is Namo. And there's scenes of her going and getting information about writing the story. So she goes to see various craftspeople, I believe in Nagata, where she goes and you could see her talk about cafes that she went to, different artisans she talked to kind of get information from the story. And it's all about the different locations she visits. It's interesting because I believe they're all real locations.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't know if every shop and store that they talk about is necessarily real, although some of them are, but the shopping areas and the place names and the cities and all that, those are all real places. And the coppersmithing and the designs and the tools and all of those are all based entirely on real things.
And then the good thing about this is that it continues this same idea in the later volumes. It dives deeper, it dives more into this. So if you like this, it just gets better in the following volumes. If you're looking for a good slice of life story set in present day, there's no demons or anything like that. You want to learn something about some craft. I can't think of a better story than this.
What I would say is this. If you're looking for a story like this and what you really want to see is learning about the smithing and learning about the work and the things that are involved in that, it's here. it's part of it, but it's never the focus. The focus is on Shuu and Shiina and their relationship and them like working through this, with coppersmithing and all that as a side story / background for every single thing that they do.
Fair enough.
There are other stories where it's, I haven't read enough of it to say it, but I'm thinking of one you brought up before of Akane Banashi about Rakugo, where it sounds like that is much more of how does Rakugo work and the characters trying to do that, whereas this one is, this is coppersmithing, this is what this main character does, but it's more of shy boy, outgoing girl, different things involved, and like watching their relationship through the lens of he's a coppersmith. He does this sort of very detailed manual thing, rather than the coppersmithing is not front. The bride's part of the title is front and center. The coppersmithing is slightly to the left and a step behind. Still there, still a big part of it. And if you want anything on it, especially in the later books, there is a lot more of the technical aspects to it.
Yeah, so it's a romantic, I wouldn't even call it a comedy. There are some funny parts, but it's not really a comedy. It's a romance story with a setting of coppersmithing in Niigata, present day. Niigata. I'll get it right eventually. So if you're interested in that at all,
yeah,
this is a really nice, not soothing is the right word, but a nice, easy read. It's a read that you can just kind of pick up. It's nice and cozy. It's just like, okay, I'm just gonna read this story about these characters. Nothing crazy happens. Like, the only sad parts is that you learn, well, you already know that Shu's dad died, and they go back to that to kind of learn more of where he comes from. But there's no dark things about this story. It's not that kind of story. It's not some dark past or things like that. It's very much a cozy slice of life story.
I think slice of life and romance is definitely more of where it is. It is funny. It can be funny and it can be really cute, but it's not, like you said, it's not a comedy.
Right.
And I would say even the sort of darker parts where it's like, oh yeah, where they're talking about how Shu's father passed away and things like that. In the first book especially, but even later on, the point isn't Shu's father died and Shuu is sad. It's Shu's father died, Shuu is sad, and this is how Shiina tried to help.
Yes, that is true.
And like how their relationship changed because of that. The things that sort of came from it and the way it sort of happened and how their relationship got to here. So even in these sort of quote unquote darker moments, it's less about the sadness and more about, oh yeah, when this happened, you did this, and that's sort of when this part of our relationship changed. One other thing I do want to say.
Sure.
This is a story that's... So you and I have both read the first 4 books.
Yes.
And I think you would agree that while the story does get better, this first volume is very good.
Yep.
And it's better than other first volumes in a lot of ways in that you get the sort of like high point you're going to see throughout the series from book 1. You don't need 2 or 3 books of building up to get to the point that you're going to enjoy it.
No, I don't think so. So one thing I would say is that the story itself is very consistent. It's not one of those where, as you're reading it, there's good chapters, there's some bad chapters. It's very much, as you're reading it, the chapters all kind of flow together. Some of them are one-off stories, but for the most part, they're very good. There's no ones that are, okay, this is not as good as the previous ones. They're all very good. They're all fit together well. They move the story along. The only complaint I would have is that while we know there's a bride eventually, but it's years down the road, I wonder if the story will have to progress faster as it goes.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. I think, though, one thing it does well is while every chapter is kind of self-contained, not entirely self-contained,
right,
but mostly what happens in a chapter, there's a beginning, middle, and end to it. But there's still like connective tissue between the chapters of that happened 3 chapters ago, and people still remember it and talk about it. So it's not like everything's completely separate. There's clearly a through line. But this chapter is about X, and we're going to have that whole story, yep. And then that chapter will end, and then we'll be on the next chapter. And they do overall tend to be very good. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the things I was trying to say was it's not a story where you're going to have to wait for it to get really good. Part of that is because it is a very simple story, so you're not going to get anything outrageous. You're not going to get anything unusual, but you are getting a well-told little romance that just clicks really early on. You can take this first book and read it and enjoy it, and there you go. Mm-hmm. Whereas there's a lot of stories that I do really like, but it's good in the first book. It's really good in the second book. And then when you get to the 5th book, oh, well, then it's great. Yeah. This one is like, no, the first book is great. Second book is great.
So I believe the book 4 came out in December, and I believe there probably will be 1 book a year, just based on how the release has been in Japan. Yep. So it's one of those. There's a number of books, and they're all really good. Mm-hmm. There won't be a ton of them, at least not for a long time if this continues for quite a while. So it's very much, you can pick it up, you can read it, you can enjoy it, and just kind of relax. It's a very relaxing book to just read. And that's based on all the other books I'm reading. It's like, okay, yeah, this is a good change of pace. It's just kind of nice, light little story. And it teaches it about coppersmithing, different parts of Japan. It's really good.
I agree with all of that. It's an excellent series.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I highly recommend it. This is just the story volume 1. There's 4 more in English, 2 more that'll eventually come here that are out in Japan, and I believe it's still ongoing. I think it's a monthly one.
Yes. It is in Heart. I can look this up specifically. So it's it's from a specific magazine called Haruta.
Yes.
Haruta. The most famous other thing in it is Delicious and Dungeon.
Yes.
It's in the same thing. Haruta it used to be a bi-monthly, then monthly, and then bi-monthly again, and now it's just 10 issues per year.
Okay.
It's more of a monthly series. The chapters don't read much like a monthly, other than they're more self-contained, which feels more like a monthly series, but they're not super long.
No.
A lot of monthlies are more like 40 pages, and these are still more like 25, 30 each. Yeah. So they're like a slightly longer weekly without being super long, which I think actually works well because the story is a little on the simpler side, that they don't need all those pages.
Yep.
But it is still currently ongoing. It's been going since 2020.
Yeah.
The latest book in Japan came out October of last year.
So definitely check it out. I like it. I think you like it.
I do like it. That's why I recommended it to you.
That is true.
And I'm glad that you brought it up to do. Yeah, no, this was a story that I don't know if it matters, but it was just like, hey, the story of how we found this, of just randomly looking around at books, and it's like, oh, Coppersmith Bride. Let me read the summary. A girl gets engaged to a coppersmith, and cozy slice of life random story, and he got sure, I'll try that. Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, this is exactly what it is, and it's really good.
It does do that, yes.
Yeah, it's what it says on the tin, 100%, and it does a good job of it.
Yes. Yeah, definitely check it out.
All right. And with that, thank you all very much for listening to this episode of the Mudai Manga and Book Club podcast. Again, please feel free to let us know your thoughts, feedback, or anything. If you are listening through any of your podcasters, please leave your comments and questions there. Or if you are on YouTube, definitely let us know down in the comments. Any questions or anything you'd like us to talk about, or just what you think of the show. You can also reach us at mudaimangabookclub@gmail.com if you'd like to email us directly, or you can contact us on Blue Sky at Mudai Manga Book Club. If you are listening on the audio, check us out on YouTube. at Mudai Manga Book Club, on YouTube, which makes sense since you would be watching YouTube. My brain is working very well. I did not just hammer myself in the thumb and then fall over in a heap. Or if you are listening in YouTube, and you can check us out on audio podcasts where most podcasts are. We're still working on iTunes and a few others.
Yes.
Check us out there as well. So, Louie, do you have a final recommendation?
One thing I've been watching recently is this show called Star Trek Lower Decks. And it's, I don't know, have you ever watched Rick and Morty? Do you know of Rick and Morty?
I know of Rick and Morty. Okay. I know vaguely about Star Trek Lower Decks, and I have heard good things about it, to be fair.
Okay. So for anyone who doesn't know about Star Trek Lower Decks, it's an animated show done in a similar style to Rick and Morty. But its focus is on Star Trek, obviously, and the next generation era. But specifically, it's about all of the people who aren't on the bridge. So it's about all the ensigns and everyone else who are not in charge and things like that. It's like, okay, what are the people who just do all the little grunt work, who aren't overseeing the ship as a whole? What are their lives like? And it's like all the crazy things, shenanigans and things like that they get into, and it's fun. It's very goofy. You can kind of see like the Rick and Morty. Well, it's not that kind of story. It has some of those hints, but it's good. It's funny. If you really like Star Trek, it's very behind the scenes kind of, okay, these are little nods to all these different things that happen in the show. So if you like Star Trek, check it out. There's 5 seasons. It's at least 4. I think the 5th one just came out, but I've only watched the first one, and it's like 10 episodes, so it's a quick watch for the most part. It's funny. It's a very funny show, and dives deep into the Star Trek lore sometimes.
Nice. Yeah. That's really great. As for me, I just wanted to take a moment in January of 2025 to recommend a couple of songs that I think everybody should start listening to again. Specifically, they're called Euphoria, 616 in LA, Meet the Grahams, and there's this last one that's kind of an underground track. It's called New Lake Us. Oh, sorry, no, Not Like Us by this musician called Kendrick Lamar.
Never heard of him.
If you know, you already know. And if you know why I'm recommending these right now for things that may be going on in the world right now, to maybe go and listen to them again just to be a fucking troll, you already know. And if you don't know, you missed kind of one of the biggest rap beefs that ever happened in the world. And these 4 songs are Kendrick Lamar's from it, and they are some of the best that have been released. Currently, right now, I am on a huge Euphoria kick because that was his first one directly as part of the back and forth in the beef. And the amount of called shots and the amount of stuff that he predicted of what was going to happen in that one song is starting to get really terrifying. I love hip hop and rap, but I'm not super knowledgeable about it. It was a huge thing in the music industry last year. These songs are excellent. Kendrick Lamar is one of my favorite rappers. Technically not my favorite, although my actual favorite doesn't seem to be making music right now, so it doesn't matter. But just excellent music. And the artist, Kendrick Lamar, has done some of the craziest, most exceptional albums of all time. So you should all go listen to all of these songs again. As for next week's episode, we're going to be doing something very similar to the Coppersmith Bride, by which I mean we're going to be doing something completely different. We're going to be taking a look at Isak by Shinji Mikari and illustrated by Double S, Volume 1 and the first 2 chapters of Volume 2. This is a story of a Japanese marksman in the 30 Years' War in Europe. You know, wonderful romantic comedy.
Yes.
No, that is what we're going to be talking about next week. Excellent series. But we're just going to be covering the first book and the first half of the second book. That's a nicer stopping point in the story of what happens in Isak. So if you'd like to join in along with us and follow along, check it out. Other than that, we'll see you all next time.
Bye.
Peace.
And then after that, we're going to review the Coppersmith's Bride. Let me say that again. We're going to...
No, really, try it again.
No.
Okay. I'm awake now. Music in between sections. Yeah.
Okay.
Now remember, it's pronounced Coppersmith.
Okay. Yeah, we're gonna see how much I messed that up this time. Count it down. You okay over there?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Okay. And our big review today is Coppersmith's Bride. I can't see.
You actually got it right, too.
I know.